Fighting games have been around for a long time, way longer than I've been alive at least. The game genre has been out for so long that my dad played fighting games when he was younger, and they've stayed relevant long enough for me to play them now. This genre has really stood the test of time, and while it had a little fall off, it has come back stronger than it ever was. I've seen plenty of analysis videos on why specific fighting games are more fun than others, but I rarely see people go into depth about why the genre as a whole is fun. When the first surge of fighting games happened, it was in arcades. It was places where you could go and just play games with a small sum of money per match. So everyone went there because you couldn't really have that game console at home. The dynamic was definitely different back then, with a lot less toxic trash talk because you're sitting right next to your opponent and you're always using the same controller as your opponent. But the core essence of the game is still the same. Whoever's health bar goes down first loses, and whoever has health bar left wins. But of course, if you know anything about fighting games, or arcades in general, you know that they kind of died when gaming companies found a way to give you the console at your home. Long gone were the days where you had to pay a quarter for every match you wanted to run. Now was the time that consoles took over. Fighting game popularity definitely dwindled when the game consoles came out, but in no way were they forgotten. It was just hard because you had to have someone at your house to play, and unless you wanted to play against CPU all day, and eventually when the games got internet connection, which wasn't very good at the time, it made people not want to play unless you're Smash. In recent years, with things like rollback netcode almost being a standard in the FGC, and extremely polished games with in-depth kits coming out, fighting games have made a resurgence and have become more popular than ever. You have games like Guilty Gear Strive, Street Fighter VI, Tekken 8, and Smash selling millions of copies, which is unheard of for fighting games until now. With that brief little history lesson over, let's get to the meat and potatoes of this video. Why are fighting games fun? When you think of it on the surface level, the answer is obvious. We like pressing buttons in special ways to beat our opponents. It's a very simple gameplay loop of fighting, losing, and winning. But if you know anything about this channel, surface level just doesn't cut it. This video is going into the deeper aspects of why these games are fun enough to last for decades at this point. The first thing I think of when I think of fighting games being fun is the rhythm. Now this has been proven plenty of times, and it's that musicians pick up fighting games way faster than other people. Think of people like Lily Pichu. She picked up Tekken for the Sajam Slam and was immediately better than everyone else who had just picked up the game for the first time because of her rhythm. The rhythm of fighting games is something that anyone who knows a combo, consciously or even subconsciously knows. And if you think of the buttons on a fight stick like the buttons on a drum pad, you can kind of see what I mean. A perfect example of this is the Street Fighter VI iteration of DJ and his level 2 super. When you do the super, to get the most out of it, you have to do a variety of button presses in the rhythm every single time. Humans like playing instruments and listening to music because we inherently like rhythm. This extends and translates to video games. It's a good way to feel like you're good at something because making something into rhythm makes it easier to remember, and that's why when some people study, they use mini songs in their head to help them remember everything. For example, when I was in history class in my junior year of high school, we had to remember every president, how many terms they served, and what party they ran as. I didn't study for the test until the day before, and I only spent about an hour or two just coming up with a song and a pattern that I could follow to help memorize it. The next day when I took the test, I was confident that I got everything right, and it turns out I did. So this is why I think rhythm adds a very core fun aspect to fighting games, and games with good rhythm tend to be more fun. Now we get into my personal favorite thing about fighting games, and it's what truly makes them fun to me. It's the strategy involved. The goal of this strategy is to develop a flowchart that you can picture in your head when an enemy throws out a move or when you throw a move out. This flowchart should have the exact best couple of moves to choose from that flow into the next thing you're trying to do. When I'm playing Smash Bros with my friends, my brain is on autopilot. I'm having as much fun as I can, and I just want to make cool things happen. But when I want to, I can actually think about what I'm doing, and when I'm thinking about my best move, and if it hits, what the follow-up is. This back and forth mental battle that's in the background of this genre is my most prominent reason for playing fighting games in the first place. I have always liked strategy games, and the strategy games with minimal room for physical execution error have always been the ones I'm good at. Pokemon just released a new mobile game where you collect cards and battle, basically like real life Pokemon cards, and I've been playing that trying to come up with strategies, and it has been really fun for me, so that's my personal favorite aspect of why fighting games are fun. The next thing I noticed when I was thinking of why fighting games were fun for me was the harder execution. This came to me while I was working out, and I was thinking about my favorite exercises to do. I was bench pressing and doing pull-ups, things that are easy to execute no matter who you are. And these things are great for a beginner, but the advanced thing are just more fun. My favorite exercise to do in that workout was the kettlebell snatches, where you hike the bell between your legs and flip it up and punch towards the sky. This requires a harder execution, and therefore it is more fun. Fighting games, for the most part, unlike other games, have very unforgiving timings that you must hit. The actual physical execution of the moves is harder than other games. I think of games like platformers and FPS games as the bench press or deadlift or squat of the video games. Anybody can pick them up and learn how to play. Fighting games are in the category of kettlebell snatches and other exercises where it's good execution that works the right muscle. When I think of this category of games, I think of RPGs with action commands, Metroidvanias, Souls games, and of course, fighting games. I think there are outliers to this where there of course are easy fighting games and easy Souls games, etc. But most of these games are known for having unforgiving timings with unnecessary execution to make things happen, and if you don't execute correctly, you get punished. Something else that I think makes fighting games so fun is how established they are. What I mean by this is they have been around for a very long time and had time to polish and round out these hard edges to feel more smooth. There have been things introduced since the beginning of fighting games that needed to be figured out, like online gaming and home console gaming, but as a whole genre, it's a very established one, and most of the time, people know what they're going into. This makes the games recognizable, understandable, and gives the consumer a realistic expectation on what they're getting into. Think of how many fighting games that you know that there are at least 15 installments, or some crazy high number that no other game seems to get to unless you're a sports game. These polished aspects of fighting games makes them really feel good to play because developers have finally figured out after many years how the movement should work, how the timing should work, and other things that take time to develop. Think of it as someone conducting multiple studies on a topic. Eventually, when you run enough of these experiments, you start to figure out what the most liked aspect is throughout these games, and you can put them together to form a game that has the most favorable feature from each of these aspects. Running with the statistics theme, fighting games have a very well developed bell curve of skill. For those who don't know what a bell curve is, it is a graph that in this case takes a person's skill and puts it on a graph. When it takes all of the players and puts their skill on the graph, if the game is made well and the rank system works very well, the middle should be by far the highest, with a majority of players inside that zone, and the outsides where the beginners and very good players and professionals are should be lower. Bell curves are split into 3 major segments. These are called standard deviations. If it is executed correctly, a majority of players should be within 1 standard deviation of the very center of the graph. Approximately 68% of players should be in this middle part, which means approximately 32% of players should be outside these middle parts. After that, if you add the intermediate segments where you're not a beginner, on the other side you're not a pro, it should account for about 95% of players. And last but not least, if you add the very beginner, or getting close to the highest rank, you should get about 99.7% of players, and the people outside of that are the very worst and the very best of the game. Why do I bring this up, you ask? The reason is because fighting games getting this correct is very difficult, but when they do, everything feels balanced. I'm sure everyone can think of a fighting game that has an inflated rank system where there is a character or characters that are overpowered, or for some reason, plugging happens. This offsets the bell curve and makes it so it's way higher on the right side, therefore not being symmetrical and no longer being a bell curve. A bad rank system can ruin the fun in a game, so when the games get it right, it's very important and makes or breaks the game. The last thing that I could think of when I thought about what really makes fighting games fun is the community. The fighting game community is the most tight-knit group of people I have found in gaming. Of course, we have our problems, but people like to help other people out, and I think that makes this special. Something that I don't think happens in many other games that I do think happens with fighting games is that the content creators seem to have the same attitude that the players do. Now what does this mean? This means that the positivity you normally get from content creators stems to the other players. The complaints are fed through normal players into content creators, and the events ran by people can be entered by everybody and not just creators most of the time. And if it is invite only through creators, it is usually to bring publicity to fighting games, which overall helps everybody, so I don't think anybody is complaining. I can't quite point out what makes it so much different, but when I play a fighting game and watch somebody play a fighting game, I feel so much more connected. When I watch another game be played, it feels so much more disconnected from my gameplay and what I'm feeling. This could be because the content creators have matured with the games, the genre isn't as big as the others, or many other things. But whatever is happening, it is making the space feel a lot more positive and helpful to others for the most part. You can never avoid total negativity, but I feel that this community is very good at keeping it at a minimum. This community is patient, and a lot of the critiques I see are actually valid. They aren't just people complaining to complain, and they also are very cordial with it. They don't just hurl insults and hate on other people. They ask for these things to be changed because they actually think it could create a better experience. Where this philosophy tends to break, though, is on overpowered characters. People really hate that. It is understandable because it causes rage when you die to somebody who's cheesing a move. That doesn't mean you should do it, though. I'm just saying I understand where they're coming from. I think that went through and made a good summary on why fighting games are fun. I don't think I've covered everything. In fact, I know I didn't cover everything. But what I do know is that these are the major reasons I could think of. These aspects of fighting games stood out to me as the ones that make me want to come back and play again. An honorable mention would be the characters and how much personality they have, but most of these other aspects are gameplay focused, so the personality one didn't fit as well with the theme. Overall, I love fighting games. I love the community, I love the feeling of overcoming something that you couldn't do before, and I just love challenging myself. This genre is fun no matter what skill level you're at. If you have anything that I missed, feel free to leave it in the comments, and I will respond to it the best I can. I like to see what other people think about this topic, and would like this video to almost be a discussion board on fighting games. All that being said, thank you for watching. This was a fun video to make because I got to explore a question that I've had for a while that I probably would have answered even without a video. This was definitely one of the more fun videos to make, so I hope you have a great rest of your day. Remember to take care of yourself, and as always, God bless.